The stars above the colony world of Haven 3 shone brighter than usual that night. The little town rested on soft hills under the thin blue sky of dawn. People lived simple lives here. They farmed, traded, and told stories about the first ships that had brought humans to this world. It was a peaceful corner of space where no one expected danger. Among the families of Haven 3, there was a group of children who often played together near the Silver Lakes. Aaron, a curious boy with sharp eyes, was their leader. His best friend Mila was clever and calm, always the one who found solutions when others argued. With them were Rian, Toma, and Lyra, all between 10 and 12 years old. Their laughter often echoed across the fields, a sound that made the adults smile. But on that night the laughter faded. A strange humming filled the air. The sky above shimmered like rippling water. No one in Haven 3 had ever seen anything like it. The children looked up, their eyes wide. A large shape appeared above the fields, glowing faintly. It was smooth and silver, like a mirror reflecting the stars. Aaron thought it was a cargo ship flying too low. Mila felt uneasy. She whispered that something was wrong. Before they could run, a bright light surrounded them. It was warm and soft, not painful, but it froze them in place. Their bodies rose gently from the ground, lifted into the air. They tried to shout, but no sound came out. The adults in the colony saw the light from their homes. Farmers rushed outside, mothers screamed their children's names, and alarms began to sound. But before anyone could reach the fields, the light vanished. The silver shape faded into the dark sky as if it had never been there. The field was empty. The children were gone. The next day, the colony searched everywhere. The governor sent messages to nearby systems, but no one replied. Drones scanned the area for traces of energy, but the readings made no sense. It was as if the ship had come from nowhere and disappeared the same way. Days turned into weeks. The hope of finding the missing children began to fade. But above the stars, far from human reach, something much larger was unfolding. Aaron woke up in a round room made of smooth black metal. The air was thin and smelled strange, like burned dust. Around him, the other children were also waking. Mila was the first to speak. Her voice was shaking, but she tried to stay calm. She asked if everyone was okay. They nodded, frightened but unharmed. The room had no doors, only walls that glowed faintly blue. Strange lines ran across the floor, forming patterns they couldn't understand. When Aaron touched one of the glowing lines, it pulsed softly like it was alive. A moment later, a part of the wall opened soundlessly, revealing a tall being standing on the other side. It was not human. Its skin was pale gray, its body thin and graceful. Its large black eyes blinked slowly as it stepped forward. The children froze, unsure whether to move or speak. The creature tilted its head slightly, then pressed something on its wrist. A soft voice echoed through the room in broken English. "Do not fear. You are safe," but the voice did not sound comforting. It was cold and distant, like a machine repeating words it didn't understand. The alien extended a device toward them, scanning each child with a light beam. Aaron took a step back, trying to block the others. The creature stopped and stared at him longer than at the rest. It seemed curious. Then it said something in a language the children couldn't understand and left the room. The wall closed behind it. Mila whispered that they were inside a ship. She had seen pictures of alien vessels before. Aaron nodded slowly. He didn't know where they were or why they had been taken, but he knew one thing. They couldn't wait for help. If they wanted to go home, they had to find a way themselves. Days passed, though they couldn't tell time. The aliens brought them food that looked like soft white cubes and water that tasted metallic. They watched the children constantly through invisible cameras. Every few hours, they were taken into different rooms filled with glowing machines. The aliens made them touch strange symbols and walk on platforms that scanned their bodies. Sometimes they showed them lights and sounds to study their reactions. At first, the children were terrified, but soon their fear began to turn into curiosity. Mila noticed that the aliens reacted quickly when she spoke certain words, so she began to test them. She pointed to objects and repeated simple human words. Wall, light, door. The aliens didn't stop her. Instead, they seemed interested. They even repeated the words in their own language. Within a week, the children had learned how to understand simple commands from their captors. They discovered that the aliens called themselves the Zirath, members of a vast galactic empire that ruled thousands of worlds. To the Zirath, humans were still a young species, barely known outside their small part of the galaxy. The children had been taken as part of a research mission. The Zirath wanted to know why humans adapted so quickly wherever they went. They wanted to understand what made them different. But they didn't see the danger in what they were doing. Aaron and Mila began to lead quiet lessons among the children. When the aliens were gone, they would whisper to each other about what they had learned. They started mapping the ship in their minds. They remembered where the food came from, how the walls opened, and where the guards usually stood. Every little detail mattered. One night, when the ship was silent, Aaron and Mila sneaked close to the glowing wall. Mila placed her hand on one of the patterns and watched the light shift. It responded to her touch. The two exchanged a look of surprise. Maybe they could use the ship's own systems against their captors. They didn't know it yet, but the Zirath scientists had begun to notice something unusual. The human children were learning far faster than expected. Their mental tests were showing results beyond what the Zirath thought possible for such a young species. Even without tools, they were observing, adapting, and planning. In the control chamber, a senior Zirath researcher named Soren studied the recordings. "These humans are different," he said in his language. "They change too fast. Their minds are not stable, yet they grow stronger each day." The commander replied calmly, "Then we will learn faster." They are only children, but Soren wasn't sure. He had seen many species before, strong, clever, even aggressive ones, but none had that spark he saw in the human eyes. A kind of silent fire that didn't go out, no matter how much fear they faced. Meanwhile, in their locked quarters, Aaron looked at the others and said quietly that they had to stay brave. Mila agreed. She said they had to learn everything they could before trying anything. "We will go home," she told them. Maybe not today, but one day. They made a promise. They would not forget who they were. They would not let the aliens change them. Every day they would keep learning, watching, remembering. Far from the colony, the adults on Haven 3 never gave up hope. The missing children became a story told across human worlds. Some said they had been taken by space raiders. Others believed they had been lost to the stars. But deep in the night, parents still left a light burning by the window, hoping their children would somehow see it and find their way back. And somewhere in the endless dark, those same children were already planning the first steps of something that would one day shake the galaxy itself. They didn't know how or when, but they felt it deep inside. The same feeling that had carried humans across oceans, deserts, and now the stars. They were only children, but they were human. And that alone made them dangerous to any empire that tried to cage them. Days slowly turned into months inside the vast ship of the Zirath Empire. The children no longer cried when the glowing walls opened or when the tall gray figures entered. Fear had turned into quiet patience. They had learned how to survive. Aaron had become the voice that kept everyone steady. He reminded the group each morning that they were still human, that they still had a home waiting for them somewhere among the stars. Mila was the thinker. She watched everything carefully, learning how the ship worked, how the Zirath moved, and what patterns repeated every cycle. Each child had found a small task to focus on. Ryan studied the devices they were given during tests. Toma memorized the alien words he overheard. Lyra tried to understand the strange writing that glowed on the walls. They worked together silently, pretending to follow orders while gathering knowledge piece by piece. The Zirath believed the children were simply adapting to their environment. They saw them as harmless test subjects, but in truth, a quiet fire was growing inside those young minds. The humans were forming something new, a secret unity. One night, when the ship's lights dimmed for rest, Aaron whispered to the others. He said they could not stay helpless forever. They needed a plan, a goal, something to believe in. Mila suggested a name for their hidden group. She called it the Spark, because even a small spark can grow into a great fire. Everyone agreed. That night the Spark was born. Their first rule was simple: no one gives up. The second rule was to learn something new every day. The third was to never let the Zirath know what they were planning. Over the next few weeks, the Spark began to work quietly. When the Zirath brought them food or led them through the testing halls, the children paid attention to every step. They counted the distance between rooms, watched how doors opened, and noticed which walls made a faint humming sound. They learned which guards were always present, and which ones sometimes left early. Mila discovered that the control panels near the food stations responded to sound. When she hummed softly near one, the lights changed color. That meant the ship's systems might react to human voice frequencies. She kept this secret between herself and Aaron. During one of the routine studies, the children were placed inside a circular room filled with floating symbols of light. The aliens called it a learning chamber. The purpose was to measure how fast the children could understand shapes, numbers, and logic patterns. The Zereth believed this would show them how the human brain evolved. But the children saw it differently. Aaron noticed that when he touched a floating symbol, the light shifted and stayed connected to his movement. He began to test different motions, drawing simple shapes like circles and lines. Mila followed his lead. The chamber's sensors reacted quickly, flashing brighter each time they found a correct pattern. The aliens in the observation deck whispered among themselves. They were surprised that the children learned faster than expected. By the end of the session, the Zerath were pleased. But Aaron and Mila had learned something far more important. The technology around them responded not only to alien commands, but also to their own touch and sound. It meant the ship's systems could recognize them. That realization gave them new hope. Later that night, when everyone was resting, Aaron sat near the soft light on the wall. He thought of his home, of the fields on Haven 3, and of the stars above the lake. He missed the smell of the wind and the sound of his mother's voice. Mila quietly sat beside him. She said that the stars here looked colder, but they still reminded her of home. Aaron smiled faintly and said one day they would see their real stars again. Mila nodded. She believed him. The next morning, the Zereth scientists increased their tests. They wanted to see how humans handled teamwork. They placed the children in groups and gave them puzzles to solve together. The Zereth did not realize that humans were naturally good at cooperation. Within a short time, the children completed every task faster than the computer predicted. One of the alien supervisors, a younger researcher named Carey, started observing them more closely. He noticed that when one child struggled, the others quickly helped without being told. No other species in the Empire did this with such ease. Care reported it to his superior, but the higher officer dismissed it, saying humans were emotional and unpredictable, nothing more. However, Care could not ignore what he saw. The humans worked like a single unit, and that unity frightened him in a way he could not explain. Meanwhile, the spark continued to grow. They started to communicate using small hand signs when cameras were watching. They also used simple words from the Zereth language to hide their real meaning. Every day, their knowledge expanded. After several months, Mila discovered something amazing. During one test, she was allowed to handle a small energy tool. It was shaped like a thin rod with light at the tip. When she pressed it near a wall, it created a tiny spark that repaired a broken circuit. The aliens didn't notice, but Mila realized that the same spark could also unlock certain panels if used the right way. She whispered this to Aaron during their mealtime. Aaron's eyes lit up. They decided to keep the tool and hide it under a loose part of the floor. From that day forward, the spark had their first real key. The Zerath ship was enormous, almost like a flying city. It had areas for research, sleeping quarters, command centers, and vast observation halls. The humans were kept in the lower decks, close to the laboratories. Above them, thousands of Zerath worked in silence, unaware that a quiet rebellion was forming right below their feet. Weeks later, a strange event occurred. The ship suddenly trembled as if hit by something. The lights flickered. Sirens echoed through the halls. The Zerath rushed to control panels while the children were locked in their quarters. Through a small window, Aaron saw flashes of light outside. It looked like they were flying near a storm of energy. Later, they learned from overheard words that a solar flare from a nearby star had hit the ship's shields. Power systems were damaged and repairs were underway. That night, when everything was silent again, Aaron whispered to Mila that the power failure could be their chance. If they could find a way to open one door using the energy tool, they might escape into the tunnels. Mila agreed, but she said they needed more information first. The next few days, they pretended to be obedient while secretly observing how the Zerath fixed the damaged systems. They noticed which cables were used and where power nodes were placed. Mila memorized the sequence of lights that appeared when the main door unlocked. After collecting enough details, the spark prepared their first move. When the next rest cycle came, Mila took the hidden tool and pressed it against the lower wall panel. A faint hum filled the air. The others held their breath. Slowly, the wall shifted, revealing a narrow passage lit by blue light. They didn't go far that night. They only explored a few meters before returning and closing the wall again. But what they saw gave them hope. The passage connected to a maintenance area filled with machines and vents. If they followed it long enough, it might lead to freedom. From that night onward, the spark had a secret route. Unknown to them, one of the cameras in the hall had caught a small flicker of movement near the wall. Soren, the senior scientist, reviewed the footage. He paused the screen and saw Mila's faint outline. He frowned. The humans were becoming unpredictable again. Soren called Care and ordered him to tighten surveillance. But Care hesitated. He said maybe the humans needed space to feel comfortable. Soren disagreed. He knew something unusual was happening. He could sense it. Meanwhile, inside their hidden passage, the children whispered about their plan. Aaron said they would wait for the right moment. Mila added that they needed to gather tools and learn how to read the alien screens. They could not rush. Each night they met there and shared everything they had learned that day. They began to feel stronger together, less afraid. Even the youngest among them, Lyra, stopped crying at night. She said she dreamed of Earth and of the stars shining over the lake. Aaron told her that dreams are powerful because they show what people fight for. Mila smiled at that. The others nodded quietly. The spark was no longer just a name. It was a promise. Far above them, the Zareth Empire continued its endless rule across the stars, unaware that in one of its own ships, a handful of human children had started something that would one day challenge the entire galaxy. And deep inside that ship, the spark kept growing, brighter, stronger, and waiting for the right time to become a flame. Time moved slowly on the enormous Zerath ship, but the spark did not waste a single moment. The children were no longer small. Months of observation, learning, and secret practice had transformed them. Their minds had grown sharper, their bodies stronger from navigating the ship's complex corridors. Fear had not disappeared entirely, but it no longer controlled them. Instead, it had become a tool, one they could use to think clearly and act wisely. Aaron sat with Mila and the others in the hidden passage they had discovered months before. The faint hum of the ship's energy resonated through the walls, a sound they had come to recognize. Tonight, Aaron spoke with determination. We have learned their language, their systems, and their routines. We know how they watch us. Now it is time to think beyond hiding. We need a way to move through the ship without being seen. Mila nodded. She had been studying the ship's maps in her mind, memorizing where each hallway led and where guards were most likely to patrol. The maintenance tunnels can take us far from the labs. If we time it right, we can explore more and even free the smaller alien species they have captured. Some of them may help us, she suggested quietly. The spark listened carefully. Each child had grown confident, ready to play their part. Even Ryan, who had once been quiet and shy, now spoke clearly and offered suggestions for movement and timing. Lyra, the youngest, practiced staying silent while moving in the shadows, her small size making her almost invisible to watchful eyes. That night, they made their first real attempt to explore the tunnels. Mila used the energy tool she had hidden for months. When it touched certain panels, doors opened silently and lights blinked in response. Aaron led the way, holding a small map they had drawn in secret. The other children followed closely, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. The tunnels were narrow but full of information. Pipes carried unknown fluids, wires hummed with electricity, and small vents offered shortcuts through sections of the ship. Everywhere they looked, the spark saw possibilities for escape and growth. They even found small rooms where the Zareth stored tools, devices, and energy cells. These items were far too complex to understand fully, but Mila carefully memorized their appearance and functions. Every detail mattered. During one exploration, they discovered a small chamber filled with other species. Small beings with green skin and large eyes huddled together, frightened but unharmed. The spark approached slowly, speaking softly in gestures and simple words. The creatures understood quickly. They had been captured like the humans, and they were eager to be free. Aaron smiled. "We can help each other," he said. "You help us learn the ship, and we help you return to your home." The creatures nodded. Over the next few weeks, they became allies. The spark taught them simple ways to hide and communicate, while the creatures shared knowledge about the ship's inner workings that even the spark had not discovered. Together, the small team became stronger. Meanwhile, the Zerath began to notice subtle changes. Some experiments that had worked before were now failing. Children who once froze during tests now moved with confidence and even curiosity. The senior scientist, Soren, watched the recordings and frowned. They adapt too quickly. Something is happening that we cannot predict, he said to a colleague. The colleague shook his head. They are still children. They cannot understand the full systems of the ship. Soren did not agree. He had seen the way Aaron led the others, how Mila solved problems, and how the group communicated without words. He had seen sparks of intelligence, of cooperation, of courage. They are not just learning, he said. They are preparing. Back in the tunnels, the spark continued to grow in skill and knowledge. They mapped every section they could access. They found emergency systems, small energy nodes, and even weak points in the walls. Every discovery was noted and discussed. They did not rush. Each child understood that patience and careful planning were essential. One night, as the ship passed near a bright star, the lights in the tunnels dimmed slightly. Aaron saw the opportunity. Tonight we test something new, he whispered. We moved through the ship using the vents to reach the upper levels. Mila checked the tool she had hidden for months. She activated it carefully and a small panel slid open. The children climbed into the vent, moving silently above corridors where the Zerath walked below. For the first time, they were above the areas that had once trapped them, looking down on the very people who had captured them. The view gave them confidence. They could see patterns in the guards' movements, doors that opened automatically, and places where alarms were unlikely to be triggered. For the first time, the spark felt the thrill of possibility. They were no longer prisoners. They were explorers, planners, and soon, leaders. After several weeks of careful exploration, the spark prepared their first test of freedom. They would move through the maintenance tunnels to reach a small dock where unmanned ships were stored. If successful, they could escape the lower decks and perhaps reach the outer hangars of the ship. The plan required precision. Aaron assigned each child a role. Mila would guide them through the energy nodes. Ryan would watch for any guards or unexpected movement. Lyra would help smaller creatures through tight spaces. Each child practiced silently for days until they could move without hesitation. The night of the test arrived. The spark waited until the shift of the guards changed. When the time came, they moved swiftly through the hidden passages, touching panels only when necessary. Mila hummed softly near one node, opening a door without raising alarms. The other children followed silently, hearts racing with excitement and fear. They reached the dock without being noticed. Small ships stood ready, sleek and silent. The spark examined each vessel, understanding that these ships were automated but could be piloted with knowledge of the controls. Mila and Aaron studied the panels carefully. With patience, they learned enough to operate one ship. Suddenly, a faint light flashed down the corridor. One of the Zerath guards had noticed a minor movement. Ryan signaled the others to freeze. For a tense moment, the guard passed without noticing them. Aaron exhaled quietly. "We are ready," he whispered. The spark knew that this was only the beginning. They could escape the lower decks, but the entire ship was vast. They would have to move carefully, using every skill and every lesson they had learned. But now hope burned brightly in their hearts. They could taste the freedom that had been promised in dreams. Meanwhile, in the observation decks above, Soren and Care argued quietly. Carrie said the children were just lucky. Soren disagreed. Luck does not explain planning, cooperation, or the use of tools they were never trained to use. Something is awakening in them. We must prepare for what may come. Back in the hidden dock, the spark celebrated silently. The small allies they had freed from the laboratories looked at the humans with admiration. "You are different," one of the creatures said softly. "You do not give up. You have a fire inside," Aaron smiled. "We are all stronger together. The ship is big, but together we can move through it. And one day we will see the stars again." Mila added, "We are learning not just to survive, but to win, to find freedom, to help others who cannot help themselves. That is our power." As they worked through the night, the spark realized something incredible. They were no longer just human children trapped on an alien ship. They were a force growing quietly in the dark. A spark that could ignite a fire, not just for themselves, but for all who were captured and oppressed in the galaxy. And far above them, the Zerath Empire, mighty and vast, did not yet know that the small humans they had taken had begun to awaken. The spark had changed. Fear had been replaced with knowledge, hope, and courage. They were ready to test themselves, ready to take the first steps toward freedom and ready to begin the journey that could one day shake the galaxy. The awakening had begun. The galaxy had changed. The Spark, once a group of frightened children, had become a force that the mighty Zerath Empire could no longer ignore. What had begun in hidden tunnels with whispered lessons and secret exploration had grown into courage and unity that could not be contained. Aaron and Mila stood on the bridge of one of the ships they had claimed. The controls, once alien and mysterious, now felt familiar. The screen showed other vessels moving in formation. Humans from distant colonies, inspired by secret messages sent by the Spark, had begun joining the mission. Small fleets formed quietly, each ship carrying people who believed in freedom, hope, and the courage that humans had always carried inside them. Aaron looked at Mila. "We have come so far," he said. "But this is just the beginning. Today we show the galaxy what humans can do." Mila nodded, her eyes reflecting the lights of distant stars. "We fight not because we hate, but because we believe in life, in freedom, and helping others. That is what makes us strong." The first engagement came unexpectedly. A small Zerath fleet approached the outer perimeter, unaware that the humans had learned the Empire's strategies. Aaron had studied their movements for months, memorizing how they reacted to alarms, how quickly they deployed ships, and which routes they preferred. Using this knowledge, he guided the human fleet to approach silently from the sides and above, unseen. When the Zerath realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans moved with precision, not with anger, not with hatred, but with determination. Ships that had once been tools of the Empire now carried freedom into the hearts of the galaxy. The Spark's teachings had been simple: work together, trust each other, and never give up. That simple lesson became a weapon more powerful than any technology. Meanwhile, within the Zerath Empire, confusion spread. Officers who had once believed themselves untouchable were unsure of what to do. Their systems were advanced, but they had never faced a species that could adapt so quickly, learn so effectively, and unite without command. The human children who had been captured and underestimated were now leading the fight for countless worlds. Mila guided a small team through a damaged corridor to rescue other captured species. The creatures they freed were hesitant at first, afraid after months of captivity, but seeing humans move with confidence and kindness gave them hope. Together they worked to open locked chambers, release prisoners, and coordinate with the human fleet. Aaron oversaw the operations from the bridge. He had learned the value of patience, of planning, and of leadership. Every decision he made now was guided by the principle that humans do not surrender, even when the odds seem impossible. Days passed, filled with careful strategies and daring maneuvers. The Spark had grown from a handful of children to a network of humans and allies across the ship and beyond. They sent messages to distant colonies, urging them to join, to believe in what they could accomplish together. Finally, the decisive moment arrived. The largest Zerath fleet, commanded by the Empire's senior officers, confronted the humans. The battle was tense, but the Spark's careful planning allowed them to move with speed and coordination the Zerath did not expect. Every human ship acted in harmony, every maneuver precise. The enemy forces were powerful, but the humans' unity, courage, and intelligence turned the tide. During the final confrontation, Aaron spoke to the fleet through the communication system. His voice was calm but firm. "We do not fight for power. We fight for freedom. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not bow, that humanity will rise whenever it is needed. Together, we are unstoppable." Mila, meanwhile, moved through the corridors of captured ships, freeing prisoners and coordinating rescue operations. The creatures they freed followed her instructions carefully, helping where they could. Every act of courage strengthened the humans' mission, proving that kindness and intelligence could achieve what fear and force could not. When the battle ended, the Zerath Empire's forces retreated. Ships that had once ruled countless worlds were damaged or destroyed, and their leaders were forced to reconsider their approach to the galaxy. Humanity had proven that even a young species, once underestimated, could change the balance of power with courage, intelligence, and unity. Aaron and Mila returned to the bridge of the main human ship. Around them, humans and freed allies celebrated quietly, mindful of the work that still lay ahead. Aaron looked at the stars, imagining Haven 3, the fields where it all began and the lake where he had dreamed of freedom. He smiled. Mila stood beside him. "We have done more than survive," she said. "We have inspired hope. The galaxy will remember that humans rise even from the darkest places." The children of the Spark, now young leaders, made a promise together. They would continue to protect those who could not protect themselves. They would continue to explore the stars, not as conquerors, but as guardians, and they would never forget the lessons learned in the hidden tunnels of the ship. Patience, intelligence, unity, and courage. Across the galaxy, planets once under the strict control of the Empire began to celebrate quietly. Messages spread from world to world. The story of humans who had been captured, who had learned, adapted, and risen, inspired countless others to seek freedom. Small communities joined forces, believing that if humans could challenge the might of the Zerath, they too could find hope and strength. Back on Haven 3, the adults had heard whispers of distant ships carrying humans and allies to victory. Though they could not yet see their children, they felt the pride and joy that comes from knowing courage and hope cannot be defeated. The light they had kept burning in their windows for months had been a symbol of belief, and now that belief had spread across the stars. Irene and Mila addressed the new council formed by humans and their allies. "Our power is not in weapons, not in technology alone," Aaron said. "Our power comes from working together, from believing in each other, and from never losing hope. That is what makes us human," Mila added. "We were captured as children, but we will leave as leaders. Let the galaxy remember that even when it seems the odds are against us, humans rise. We fight for justice, for freedom, and for those who cannot fight for themselves. And we will always rise." In the final moments, Aaron looked at Mila and then at the crew surrounding them. The Spark had become a movement, a force that could never be stopped. The human spirit, once underestimated, now burned brightly across the galaxy. Ships carried messages of peace, hope, and courage. Planets once oppressed by fear now had leaders who had learned the value of unity and resilience. And everywhere, the story of humans who had been captured, who had adapted, and who had risen became legend. The galaxy would never forget the day the Empire captured human children. It would never forget the day those children, with courage in their hearts and fire in their minds, showed the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. Aaron and Mila stood together, watching the stars. The spark had ignited a fire that no empire could ever extinguish. And as the stars shimmered above them, they smiled, knowing that humanity's journey had only just begun. The fire of humanity burned brighter than ever,